Oh, you want to be seduced by the dark side? Well, episode 6 is just for you.
I'm trying to be good with this, man.
We got a lot of shit to cover.
I don't know what I was thinking. I honestly thought we wasn't, right? And for that
you
reason...
rewatched it. I rewatched, what was it, 6? And then I got halfway through 7. I'm like, I got to go do other stuff. I was like, holy shit.
Yes!
Just the amount of notes I had just on 6. There's a lot.
I was kind of tripping because I didn't remember. You know what? I think I was just so taken back by what I was seeing that it was almost like, oh, I'm going to remember this. And it's not like I didn't remember it, but...
There's big things that happen, right?
Yes.
There's big things that happen, right? There's no combat, right? But there's big things that happen, and yet there's lots of little things. All these little, like, setting up, paying off, implying things, like... And we're not even talking... That's just episode 6. Like, episode 7, where you get the full flashback. Like, yay.
Because it wasn't really necessarily like I said, like episode 6, it wasn't really a lot going on in a way that, like I said, it's the nuances. So certain things I was, you know what? Let's go ahead and get started.
Let's do it.
You ready? All right, let's hit it. So 5, 4, 3, 2. It's Jay. I'm back again for another one, and tonight I have with me
Ryan, your nerd extraordinaire, as per usual.
Nerd extraordinaire, Ryan. How do you be?
Not tired.
Me either.
Weird, two in a row somehow. I mean, it's slightly earlier in the evening, but had a relaxing day with the boy. So
right on.
Oh, we got 2 episodes to cover. How are we going to do this, Jay? Oh my God.
We're going to have to just dive in, only because, like, you know, it's funny because this was deceptive. Like, okay, when I first saw it, right, I thought pretty straightforward for the most part. You know, they did the little parent trap thing, you know, got the switcheroo. The parents of the other sisters are going to learn about this sister, and this sister going to learn about the parents, and the other parents going to learn about the other, you know, that whole switcheroo kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're kind of learning what the other one really has without it being asked. You know, everybody's being normal but them. Everybody's having their normal reality, but that inverted child that's in that situation. So it was interesting to kind of see the parents, the quote unquote parent figures, and the kind of life each girl was having. So,
and it was interesting too with the swap, because I think I mentioned last time I called out, like, of course they swapped the clothes, right? But the clothes are also explicitly light and dark. Mm-hmm. But when Osha wakes up, and then she finds basically a pack of, like, maze knives and, like, her shoes. Mm-hmm. And so the shirt she puts on is not black. It's gray. Yeah. It's dark gray. Right, but, like, another sort of color signal, like, is being played there, I think. Yeah, right? You know, because Star Wars is so subtle with those things.
Of course. And so, of course, we're talking about episode 6, Teach/Corrupt, a.k.a. The Parent Trap. So it's back to, like you were saying before, about the dual title. Okay, so, like, the kids are spending time with each other's parents, getting new insight in the situation.
Interesting thing is, so they set up that Osha is basically on some other planet, and no, it is not Luke's planet that he stays at.
It did kind of look like that. It did.
It's similar, right? It's a similar sort of setup, but there's been multiple things confirming it's not that planet, right? See, the ship, it's got to be Khmer's ship, right? And then we kind of just, like, she's left sort of on her own, and then it cuts up to Sol, who's back on, I don't know, whatever the forest, Kofar or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And he tries to call in to the temple, do an SOS, but it doesn't work. And he has this bit where, like, he leaves who he still thinks is Osha, but is May, at the bridge, and he goes into, like, the center area of the ship, and he has this little moment where he's checking the console, and he hits it out of, like, anger and frustration.
Yes.
Like, I consistently, Sol is more emotional and more volatile throughout the whole series, even the flashbacks, as we'll see. And it's just interesting of, like, he gets angry, and then he gets his shit under control and he settles down,
Yeah.
calms down, and then we can see, you know, Basil is hiding again. It's just all these little beats that just keep adding different things.
Yeah.
Say more. Say more, Jay.
You know, yeah, yeah. You know, it's kind of like if you're not at a certain point, get washed. And so it's just interesting to see him this far along in the situation that he's in and still having these kind of tendencies or issues that he doesn't quite have a hold on. He does in a way, but then also, and not that he got to be stiff or non-feeling or whatever, because we've seen plenty of emotions, various emotions at various levels from different Jedis and stuff.
Right. He's not perfectly stoic.
Right. Yeah, it was just interesting too. Everybody's going to figure out who they're actually dealing with and how it's going to come along, and even though they're having things that happen, you know, they kind of stretch the reveals out. You know, it's going to happen with Soul and May.
The "we'll tell you everything" gets stretched all the way through the episode.
Yeah. And then I was kind of wondering too. It was like, well, you know, she was going to get him, right? She had the knives and was going to try to take him out, and I thought, well, wasn't like on the last episode she was talking about turning herself into the Jedis? So, because she was, until she got stuck in the cabin with the body, she was thinking like, oh crap, I can't. Not that it made her change her mind about things, but the way she was going to go about it wasn't going to work, because she would just walked out and saw the, you know, blood on the hands and the dead Wookiee, then they may not be listening at that time. They may be more reacting than listening, and she didn't want to risk it, which makes sense. But you already saw that she kind of had a change of heart of things, and that her sister was around, and now I'm ready to maybe, not that I'm not mad or hurt or whatever, but that's kind of why, you know, what you call Smilo Ren. That's why he was kind of, he was okay with, you know, wanting to take her out because she was changing on him. So to that point. And so when she got up and was just like gonna, you know, shiv Soul, I was kind of thinking like, well, you were on the point of really, you know, turning yourself in and letting it be what it was going to be. So I can understand her being afraid and hoping that he doesn't find out or something, but to be active in trying to get ready to take him out or try to mess the whole thing up, I thought was kind of interesting after she already kind of seemed like she was ready to turn herself in and try to work things out the best that it could be.
Yeah, I would say that bit of sort of back and forth is odd. Right? You can still be like, oh, she's going to try and do the straight and narrow, but then she runs into her sister and her own sister tries to turn her in. They've brainwashed you, right? That whole thing might be like, fuck it, right? But still, without the sort of like, there's no explainer of like why she's going to do that. She just might be paranoid and afraid and going to try and gank this guy who I was planning to kill eventually anyway.
Because before that other scene, that would have been fine. That would have been her. That's how she's been moving the whole time. So yeah, that would have been one of the ones she needed to clear house with. So, but if that whole thing didn't happen with the cabin with the dead Wookiee, then that would have been different. But seeing that part is what like,
without an explainer. Right, of her being like, I gotta change course again, right? So yeah, it is odd. I do like the other part of that scene though, where she does come up behind him, and somehow he's like, can tell she's behind him, but of course he thinks it's Osha. He's like, oh, Osha, and then has that moment of like he pulls her in, and is like, you know, basically, I'm glad you're not dead, da 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 da, and she's like, oh, this, and that's to the Parent Trap component of like, oh, this guy really cares about my sister. Right? Which she doesn't understand Soul and Osha's relationship, right? So to there's that much feeling there, right? It gives her a little bit more pause. Yeah.
And then, you know, then Osha get to see how much Smilo Ren loves her sister.
Jeez.
What?
Okay, let's get that scene.
You know what? When I saw that scene, which I never thought I would see in a Star Wars anything, movie or show, it made me think of Prince in Purple Rain when he had Apollonia going to the Lake Minnetonka.
Well, for starters, you have to purify yourself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka.
What?
You have to purify yourself in Lake Minnetonka.
I'm like, and if you're not going to get in, then I guess I'll come back out. I'm like, it was just so...
He was throwing some vibes. It just
just kind of reminded me of a YA movie, novel, or show where it's just like, oh, come on, you following the bad guy into the barn and you just chilling him. What's he doing? What's he doing? And then, only thing that didn't happen, what would normally happen in that kind of a situation, they make out of some mess. But short of that, everything else was the same. It's just like, why are they do? What is up? Like, come on. Like, I don't know.
It's the seduction of the dark side. Like, the whole thing is he's trying to manipulate and corrupt her and make her his apprentice. And so it's just another desire to put on the table. But I am curious, just like, I didn't think it was distasteful, right?
But you didn't think what was distasteful?
So the amount of skin, right? Like, that's the closest to nudity we've gotten in Star Wars, right? They didn't really show anything above what calves.
No, it wasn't about tasteful or not. It was just the fact that it was there, that it happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't about that. It wasn't like, oh, that's and it wasn't like he wasn't a good looking dude and stuff. But I'm just saying, it's like the dirt bikes. Dirt bikes are fine. Just not a Star Trek. It's extreme.
Well, too, it's like, kids might watch this, but like, I don't know. It didn't seem like it was crossing a line. It was charged. It was charged, but it wasn't anything graphic, right? So, I don't know.
Okay, if people watching with their kids, then yeah, as a parent, yeah, I'd have been upset. If I was watching with my kids, yeah, I would. Now, I might be different. Other parents might be more open or whatever. But to me, I wouldn't necessarily have them watching that. And if I walked into a room and they were watching, I'm like, hey, what are you watching? Like, you turn from that. What is that? So, but, I'm not even talking about the level of it. I was just the fact that I saw it there. I guess it's more, that is my thing, right? It's more, right. I saw it there. That's all. Yeah. But I thought it was very interesting. Like I said, it just reminded me of those young adult movies and shows and stuff. My daughter watches all that kind of stuff, so I get stuck kind of watching some of that stuff. It's just like, okay, it's just, young soap opera stuff. And it was leaning towards that.
Right.
But yeah, so he did his little spiel, and what makes this different than the other side of this with May is with Osha and Smiley is the fact that they both know what they're dealing with. They both know who they are dealing with, basically. And so as far as like, hey, I know who you are, you know who I am, this is what I'm presenting, I'm giving you a choice. Versus one side knowing everything, May, she has an advantage over Soul in the beginning because he doesn't know who he's dealing with. So
the other interesting thing, too, a good contrast at the end of the episode is, of course, Soul's figured out it's May. Mm-hmm. Stuns her, and then basically ties her down to the medical table. And it basically is like, I'm going to tell you what happened now, right? And you're going to listen. And just vibes-wise, between Soul's approach to that, and I think the titles call him the Stranger, right? Kinnear.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Approach to Osha is you can leave whenever you want.
Right. You can swim out to that ship. Yeah, you can swim out there.
I'm not gonna force anything off on you. Easygoing vibes, right? But Soul is like, we are gonna talk. You are going to listen, right? So vibes wise, there's a contrast there as well.
Yeah,
but
also
just because the two of them are presenting that doesn't mean Soul tying her up and forcing them to have a conversation is ill-intended. Versus Kamir. Yeah, you can leave whenever you want. Yeah, that's totally fine. But if not, I could teach you things.
Right. But I was also going to say, too, look at how May's reacting to Soul. May was attempting to kill him. So, the restraints were probably the best for that situation. And I think that if Osha was coming, Smiley a certain kind of way, then it probably would have been a different situation for that as well. But that I do, like you said, I do appreciate that contrast. To that in their situations. Yeah. The scene that we saw of Vanestra when she's kind of getting an update on things, trying to figure out what's going on. They realize there's a problem. She said she knows where they're at. And so she's getting a team together to get ready to go.
She's rescue party.
She's looking very guilty in a way. Not quite sure what's her involvement. It's a lot of stuff not being said by a lot of people, but she's another one that's kind of standing out, and I guess we'll find out soon
So there
what
was
the intentions are.
two things about sort of Vernestra that there. One is when Camille was like, coming out of the pool and you could see his back and he's clearly got like
Mm-hmm.
a scar or two, right?
Yep.
A couple people were like, kind of reminds me of like a whip, maybe a scar from a whip. And who has a whip lightsaber? So there was some like, is there a connection there, right? But the other interesting thing. So I again have not read any of the High Republic era comics or books or anything else like that. I know Venestra is a character from that era, but all her stuff is from when she's younger.
That's what I heard,
right?
yeah.
So like I've seen lots of, book covers and comic covers, and it's clearly a younger version of her. And I saw some people commenting like it seems really weird that she's portrayed sort of as like deferential to the council. The council's important. We need to like like sort of a little bit by the book in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they're like her characterization, like in the novels and the comics, is much more like cavalier, right?
Right.
Where it's just like we're gonna go and we'll solve this and blah, blah, blah. So it's one of those things where like, is this a case of they've got the characterization wrong, or I think in a way similar to Soul, she's got a fuck up in her past that made her go, maybe I shouldn't be so cavalier. And maybe doing things the proper way or checking in with the council or whatever has also made her go, right? It's like as you grow up, you always have these things where it's like, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. I've realized that's bad, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe I shouldn't drive like a maniac. Oh, I could have died there. I could have gotten other, like, you have one of those realizations.
Right.
You're like, I'm going to stop. Right? No, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So with, I think a lot of the Jedi, especially the 4, right, that were on the planet, they all fucked up in their own way, as we see in Episode 7. Vernestra, if I'm saying her name right, might have a similar fuck up, and it may or may not be Camille.
Right.
Right? Because it seems very clear from his talking with Osha, assuming you can trust anything he says, is that at the very least he's a former Padawan, making comments about, as a youngling,
Yeah.
He may have been like a full Jedi. We don't know. And he seems to imply that he's quite old. So...
What do you mean? I didn't catch that part.
There was some comment when they were walking back from the pool, right? Before he's like, yeah, you can leave whenever you want.
Right.
Where he's like, it was a long time ago, something along those lines, implying a long time since he was a Jedi. Right? So that could be like a decade.
Okay, yeah.
Or it could be much longer.
Right.
Because Force shenanigans.
Right.
So lots of people are trying to speculate if he's like one of the Sith Lords in the content, the lineage from Darth Bane, up to Sidious.
Huh.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But the idea that he might also just be a former Jedi that was abandoned, cast aside, right? He says he was cast aside, right? Tossed away, right? That implies he had some sort of apprentice relationship with a Jedi Master. So again, we'll have to see. But yeah, that's why there's so many things that like little bits of dialogue where, and it didn't feel like they were doing exposition dumps.
No,
it felt motivated by the actual conversation. There was nothing really that like took me out of the conversation. So
yeah, there's, like I said, especially in a situation where the way this episode was laid out, for sure, it definitely wasn't a lot of action. So this was the time for that, for exposition, for sure, or just to kind of weed out what's going on.
I feel like all the Ocean and Camille stuff, I feel like that has to be the core of this series. I feel like those scenes are some of the strongest so far, just straight dialogue-wise. I feel like if someone was like, what is my core idea, right, for this series? Like, what is the scene that everything else sort of like spawns out of,
Yeah.
it's probably that, right?
Huh.
I feel like if the writer was like that's the scene that got the most attention, I think that's it, right? I could entirely be wrong, but I feel they put so much on Khmer and that relationship. If they just wanted like a flat villain,
Yeah.
he would be very different. If he was just going to be a bad guy that had to be beaten, he'd be very different. But we are going to see him bring Osha to the dark side. I'm pretty certain she's going to become the Acolyte. Right? So having that relationship and that conversion be believable is super important to pull off this whole season, basically.
I think it's late in the season for all this to kind of come up the way it's coming up, and for it to be as important as it is to.
The question becomes that, because I don't know if they've confirmed or greenlit a season 2 yet. Definitely, like she has the director, or was it Leslie Headland, the showrunner? She has plans for a season 2. They still need to have a season arc and story. So there might be, they got to tie something up. There has to be some sort of resolution. They can't just leave things hanging. Right? So what they managed to tie up, question mark. What are your thoughts on Basil, our little sniffy civilian, rummaging around the ship? Because this is, I feel like, the weak point, not him specifically, but I felt like the stuff on the ship with Sol and May kind of had some filler, like where they're just chewing up time a little bit.
Yeah, he was the ticking clock underneath the chair, because he's supposed to be the one that's going to, when it explodes, then that's when the reveal is going to be. So it was just a matter of him piddling around, messing with stuff, trying to put things together. Is he
delaying? Is he like, he finds Osha's droid head, and then it ends up with May with his
she charges
comical ambush? Like, I don't know what Basil was trying to do in that scene.
Was he doing in general? I just think it was a filler. I think that he was, like I said, he's the time bomb underneath the chair, and the audience know that it's ticking, and the person sitting on it does not know. So I just took that as supposed to make it more tension, that, things got to keep pushing fast. Like, she's going to be discovered eventually and all this other kind of stuff. Otherwise, I don't understand his purpose necessarily being there.
Well, and the other thing too, so it's one of those things of like, well, he's going to reveal her.
Yeah.
But he doesn't immediately just go to Sol when he has a chance and be like, that's like, I know he can't speak basic, but like trying to warn him. So he tries to do an ambush in the engine room.
Yeah. But the same, but like, if he could smell and tell who she is, then why he's trying to recharge the robot droid thing to, it's all, so I'm saying, so it's a whole bunch of stuff. So he's been, like I said, that's why I think that the fact that he didn't just smell it, know it was her, and then go and told, then all this stuff was just like noodling. But I don't blame the character. I think that's how they wrote him to do.
If it was, like, I can see a utility of, they're trying to find a way to have it so that they could find Osha's robot droid, so it could end up back with May, so you could maybe have a moment of tension of, oh, you found your droid.
Right.
But no follow through of, how did you find your droid? Oh, but that's just going to make me think, oh, you are Osha. So it actually doesn't raise the tension.
I thought it was supposed to raise tension because that robot was supposed to snitch, but she stopped it from snitching by factory resetting it. So, like I said, I just think it wasn't done right. I see what they're trying to do. Those are tension points that was like, oh, a reveal. Nope, I foiled it. Another reveal. Nope, I foiled it. Because they did everything short of making that Basil hurt his nose and he couldn't smell, so he had to have other things to confirm what he was thinking, because he couldn't do it because we don't trust your nose, Basil. You hurt your nose. We can't trust your nose. Or, Right. So, yeah. So I just thought it was just...
Sol, when she runs up to the bridge and tries to, like, call out over the comms and be
Yes.
like, "Is this?" And he stuns her. Soul stuns her.
Right.
Basil's behind him.
Yes.
Basil sees that happen, and then Soul, instead of keeping the transponder on, hyperspace jumps the ship away.
Mm-hmm.
And Basil goes and hides again. So it's like, wait, did Basil actually tell Soul? Or did Soul just finally piece it out himself, stun Osha, not realize that Basil's behind him, and Basil's just a witness to all this stuff and now hiding on the ship?
I kind of was stuck on that a little bit too, but I assumed that he had told Soul, and that's why Soul knew what to do. Because we didn't have anything else to show how he would figure it out. He wasn't doing no detective work at all. He was busy going through whatever
and he
he's
has
going
that whole
through.
scene of like, right before the ship powers up, right? He's like, I need to go and essentially come clean to the council, which is relevant, as we'll see in the next episode, right? And then the power comes back on.
Yeah.
And it's like, I need to, she's like, I need to tell you everything. She's like, you haven't told me everything? And he's like, yes, I need to tell you everything. And the power comes back on. And then it's like, we'll get to it later. Right? We gotta, and then she's like, fuck it. She runs up and then he has to stun her and da-da-da-da.
Yeah. So,
it did feel like a little bit of like, we just gotta eat up a little bit of time here and like pretend like we're gonna resolve things, but then not, and then pretend like we're gonna have it and then not. There wasn't enough status quo change, right? And it didn't feel like they could have taken advantage of the bomb under the table. Right?
It could have been done a different way, but like I said, it just wasn't executed to a way that would better use of that time. Some of these episodes on here were doing the same thing where, like I said, something simple, but they just kind of draw it out. And so this show does that, but it just didn't. We saw how it was made on this one versus some of the other ones. We could kind of let it go because we got more from it, or it kind of tied in better with the other stuff that was going on. But this one kind of stood out for that.
Right, and it's not even the whole episode. It's the B plot. The B plot. It was like, you need to up that B plot.
And when you have that much time for the episode, right, and you have somebody who's been trying to tell somebody something all these years, he's been meaning to tell her or want to tell her something, and to have that time just stretched out even longer, and you kind of seeing where it's not happening, that kind of makes you be more aware of that time. And I think that's why it feels different, is because he's been saying the whole time he's going to tell and say something, not only to her, that he thinks who it is, and then also the council and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Still, during that whole time, nothing was said. And something like a light going out or a noise in the corner or whatever is still not happening. And so that makes it a little bit more irritating than some other kind of situation, like somebody's in a coma and couldn't hear it, or somebody hurt their throat and couldn't speak or something. But anything short of that,
take one of the two players out of action.
It's a lot.
So they can't have that conversation if you need to delay it.
Don't show them on the ship for 36 minutes and you won't have to wonder about it. And you know they're on the ship longer than that, but we got half of 36 minutes.
Well, and the other thing too is just like logistics wise, it's like, okay, so Soul and May have to get all the way back to the Jedi ship, have to get all the way back up to orbit.
Mm-hmm.
But we start the episode with Osha already on Kamir's planet. So it's like, what is the time difference between these two things happening? It needed a few more drafts, I think, for the B plot. So I gotta say, going back to Kamir and Osha, where they finally go back inside the cave, and he's basically like giving Darkseid 101, where it's like the whole thing's like, I don't have enough power, and it's like, yeah, you do. Like your whole thing about like you didn't train, so you're not strong in the Force. That's just Jedi propaganda crap. Like there's this other stuff, like all these emotions underneath, and I'm like, okay, here we go, Darkseid 101. And it builds into this whole thing of like, oh, okay, she's gonna leave, and he's like, all right, well, you know, you need to give me my lightsaber back, basically. And she threatens him with it, right? And he's like, go ahead and kill me. And one of the things that was interesting was that, and this is whole like OSHA's struggle with her internal turmoil because she's in her feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that she says is Jedi don't kill the unarmed, right? Which is, again, the callback to what May said when she was fighting, was it Indara? When she was fighting Carrie Ann Moss. Right? And it's the whole thing of like, this is not a Jedi thing to do, right? And he works her up through her trauma and rejection of the Jedi to actually ignite his lightsaber and hold it against his throat, right? Mm-hmm. And totally nonplussed. He's just totally fine with it. Like, that's not a complaint. Like, again, he's so vulnerable, so nonplussed that he's in charge, right? Mm-hmm. So there's I consider there's what's called the orange test. So there's a fantasy series that I love by Terry Pratchett, passed away, R.I.P. But in one of his books, he has this character that's basically like, he's a cop, right? In a medieval fantasy city, blah, blah, blah. Beat cop eventually gets like promoted to commander of the city watch. And he's been sent this clerk by basically the patrician. Like, you're going to go on this diplomatic mission. You got to take one of my clerks with you, blah, blah, blah. He's having breakfast. The clerk comes in, he's having his eggs, and he tosses the clerk an orange. And the clerk just does not react. The orange just flies up, hits him in the chest, and bounces off. He clocks the orange. He watches it and bounces it off, and just looks up, sort of confused at the commander. And the commander's like, huh. And much later, it's revealed that the clerk is actually an assassin and a spy for the patrician to do dirty work while they're off on this diplomatic mission. And the commander has figured this out by the time, way before it's revealed. And he's like, fuck, when did you know? He's like, when you didn't catch the orange. And it's not that you didn't catch it. Some people fumble. You didn't see it as a threat. You saw it, you clocked it, and you didn't do anything. You didn't freeze. Right. And it was just like, that's not the right reaction. Right? And so Kamir's whole thing is, yes, he's manipulating Ocean, all this sort of stuff. But he's just like, oh, you're not a threat, right? That's he's not saying that.
Right.
But just everything about his approach is just like, I'm not worried about you at all. Go ahead, kill me. Like, right? He's dominating all of this with her. I don't know. I thought it was well done. I thought it was well done. B plot could have been better.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of took his personality. What you said that makes more sense than what else. Because, like I said, I just took it as him just kind of like had nothing else to really live for, and he lost everything already. So he kind of like, if it's his time, sometimes you have those bad guys that'll be like,
This is not emo boy. This is not emo boy being like, yeah, if I gotta go, I gotta go.
You think you have to be emo to be like that?
I don't think he's ready to just, if you gotta kill me, you gotta kill me. No. He wouldn't be doing all the rest of the shit that he's doing if he's just like, yeah, if you want to kill me, go ahead. He's got wants and desires and plans. He wants to be able to do dark side shit without the Jedi fucking up his day. He's not going to just be like, yeah, go ahead and kill me.
Then he should have took him out when he had the chance then. Because Soul had a chance to take him out in the forest.
Soul should have taken him out. OSHA probably should have taken him out too. Yeah. Like, he played I can understand her.
I can understand her not doing it because she's young. And if it was her sister, maybe she would have went for it. But even she had to be
May
pushed.
Would have gone for it.
Even she had to be kind of pushed, Yeah. So he knows who to try it with. It's interesting that after testing out the lightsaber and he's saying like, oh, you remember that feeling, like how that feels, blah blah blah. She tries on the smiley helmet.
Yes.
To test it out, I guess, see how it fits.
And they did And they did confirm it's cortosis, which no surprise.
Yeah.
And they make it clear there in that cave, the vein of cortosis in the wall. Right? So that's why he's here, because he can extract cortosis. Probably not easy at all, but right? It's a little thing that's like, it just, without saying anything, it explains away where he got it, right? Why he's there. So nicely done on that, I think.
All right on. This is Jay and Ryan. So that was episode 6 of the Acolyte, Teach and Corrupt. Till next time, peace.